this story, I want to give two disclaimers. The first is we didn't document a whole bunch because we didn't even realize this was going to be an issue. The good thing is he was an adorable 8-month-old puppy, so we do have a ton of pictures during that time that we'll share with you. So we'll try and make this as interesting as possible rather than me just talking. As we proceed with the story, I know some people may want to draw conclusions or place blame. Please know that everyone was doing the best they could to help Bosley with the information that we had. So without further ado, here's his story. It all started with a haircut. No, not really, but that was the basis of our timeline. So early October, Bosley had one of his first haircuts. And when he got home, he started kind of pawing at his eyes and rubbing his eyes and winking a little bit. So we thought maybe a few hairs had gotten his eyes or was frustrating him.
It was about 2 weeks later when he started winking in the morning and kind of just laying down. We called the vet because the irritation seemed to have gone on for a while. Called the vet, and without expectation of being able to see the vet on a Saturday, they told us to come on in. So within about an hour of the call, we were heading into the vet. The vet did a quick look over for Bosley and found basically nothing wrong. Assumed at the time that it was probably some kind of allergy because we're getting into the end of October when everything starts dying around here. But did do a corneal stain just to check and didn't find anything at the time. So she sent us off with some medicine and eye drops, and we did that for a couple of weeks while we tried to figure out what was going on.
We continued the eye drop regimen, and we're checking in with the vet every few days to give them updates and let them know that things weren't seeming to get better at all. They were actually progressing. So his eyes began tearing, and he started keeping them closed longer. And again, we just all chalked it up to allergies. So the vet asked us to start giving him Benadryl and for itchy, watery eyes. And then we were doing warm compresses on his eyes just to kind of soothe the pain because he was continuing to paw at his eyes.
It's worth mentioning that in the first vet visit, by the time we got there, he wasn't blinking or winking anymore. So I'm sure that the vet at the time chalked it up to these are way overprotective people for their dog. But it was when we got back to the house and progressing through those weeks, he did more and more kept his eyes closed.
Right around Halloween, again, it was getting worse and not better. So I went ahead and called the breeder to see if she had ever experienced allergies in any of her dogs or knew of any kind of issues. And she said, Emily, the one thing that I've ever experienced in the 20 years of breeding is one dog about 10 years ago had Entropion. You might want to look into that. I did a little bit of research, but not knowing much about it, we just continued to watch and give updates to the vet. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with Entropion like I was, here's some information. First of all, Entropion is a condition in which the eyelids roll inward, causing irritation to the eyes. In my research, I also found this to be the most comprehensive list of dog breeds that are more likely to have Entropion. I would encourage you to look over the list to see if your dog breed is included on here. Know that we have had several of these dog breeds and never had any issues, but had we known about Entropion prior to, we would have maybe known what to look for. About a week later, Bosley was to the point where he wasn't even opening his eyes. He would open his eyes, look to see where he was going, close them, and then walk, 5 or 10 feet at a time. And he started bumping into walls, bumping into furniture. He didn't want to go outside. He was sleeping constantly, just keeping his eyes closed. The next day I called the vet. It was a Thursday afternoon. I told him that he was not being a 9-month-old puppy. He was sleeping all the time and just not wanting to open his eyes. And when he began to run into furniture, that's when we knew that something was definitely wrong. They acted swiftly and got an appointment for the following day, which was a Friday at 11 a.m. We showed up to our appointment at 11 a.m. They took him back almost immediately. He was with the vet for no more than 2 or 3 minutes, and the nurse brought him back, handed me the leash and asked if we could go to an emergency ophthalmologist today. I knew something was seriously wrong when the nurse started picking up the phone to call ophthalmologists to see if anyone could get him in. Unbeknownst to me, ophthalmologists typically close at noon on Fridays. So she was having a very difficult time finding someone who at about now 11:15, 11:20 was willing to take us in just before they closed at noon on Fridays. The situation started to escalate when another vet employee started calling on the phones. So we had two people calling different kind of ophthalmologists, emergency clinics, just anyone trying to get us in that day. And taking referrals from one, calling another one, and so forth and so on. So this went on for about 10 minutes. I'm texting Nick, I'm frantic, I don't know what's going on. They finally found an emergency clinic with an on-site ophthalmology department to take us that day. Our appointment was at 2 or 2:30 that afternoon. We showed up at the emergency clinic around 2:30. They triaged everyone, so we were being fit in on a Friday afternoon, but also had to wait a little bit. Bosley was just being loved by all of the employees there while we waited to go back to see the ophthalmologist. Around 4 o'clock, they took us back, and the nurse, I was practically in tears, I was a basket case. The nurse looked at him and said, "I know what this is, and I promise it'll be okay." The doctor came in, looked at his eyes, took pictures of his eyes, and then talked to me. She said he had a severe case of Entropion. So that is when the eyelids turn in and the eyelashes rub against the eyes. Because this had gone untreated for Entropion for quite some time, the eyelashes had rubbed ulcers in his eyes, and it was pretty significant. There was a high risk of him doing the surgery but losing sight if he didn't have the surgery immediately. She recommended having surgery that night to correct it. Per his medical notes, it says, Bosley's Entropion was so severe and causing such discomfort that it required a tacking procedure to temporarily evert the eyelids to prevent them from causing additional trauma. She explained that he would probably require a subsequent surgery to fix it. Right now, they were basically fixing the immediate issue, which was his eyelids turning in, which was a temporary solution, but then we needed a more permanent solution so that it wouldn't happen again.
So Emily dropped him off and came home, and his surgery was scheduled for that evening. And the vet had told us that essentially as soon as he's out of surgery, they would call us, they would let us know, and that we could come pick him up. I got home from work that night, and it really became a waiting game. We knew that the surgery wasn't going to be over until late, so near midnight. So we rested as best we could and sort of waited for the call. Around midnight, they gave us a call and let us know that he was out of surgery and that he was recovering, and we could pick him up in about an hour. Since we were about an hour away, we just got ready, jumped in the car, and ran up to get him. At the clinic, we were only there for, 20 minutes, waiting for him to come out. He was super lethargic and had his cone on and clearly had surgery. We picked him up, we got home, and essentially went straight to sleep.
The Saturday morning, as soon as the vet's office opened, I called to give them an update, and to my surprise, they had already received all the information from the emergency clinic and had reviewed it. So they were pulling for Bosley to come through and hoping that everything was okay. The two clinics were working in conjunction with each other, so everything that happened at the emergency clinic was then faxed over to the vet's office, so they were aware of everything that was going on with him.
And then Saturday was kind of a normal Saturday. He was acting like he was acting when his eyes wouldn't open. He was lethargic, he was laying around, but now we sort of knew he's lethargic because he had surgery, he's laying down because he's not wanting to move around a whole lot, but he was opening his eyes, and that was good. We had been probably 2 full weeks at that point without him opening his eyes or without him opening them for any significant period of time. So we went through that whole day and everything seemed to have gone well. We were dealing with a 9-month-old puppy that had just had surgery, and we were working with a 12-year-old and a 5-year-old dog that, wanted attention and wanted to be around.
I'll just say his post-op medicine regimen was quite extensive.
So yeah, I think that's worth noting. His medicine, what was it, 2 pills?
It was 3 pills.
3 pills.
3 pills twice a day, and then we had, I believe, 2 different drops, but essentially in his waking hours, we were giving him a drop in each eye every 2 to 3 hours.
And he did not like it.
And he did not like it. He fought us every step of the way, which,
if your eyes hurt that bad.
Right. He had been through a lot and he didn't want us messing with his eyes anymore. And I totally understand. So it became almost a full-time job just giving him his medicine.
Our trick to the eye drops was to wait until he was basically asleep. Mm-hmm. Then we would walk over, open his eye,
sneak attack.
Whichever eye we needed to do. And basically it was a sneak attack. Open his eye, give him the drop, let him go back to resting. So we're still on day 1, post-op. We started noticing a lot of gunk building up in the corner of his eye. And we are gonna put that picture up in just a second. If you don't wanna see a pussy eye of a dog, don't look for a minute. And when we take it down, we'll let you know. With the pus in his eye, we were a little concerned that there could be an infection growing or something more wrong. And we made the call to call the clinic. The clinic, I'm sure doing what they thought was absolutely right, said, if there's pus growing and there's an infection, and you need to bring him in immediately.
The problem with that is there was no ophthalmologist at the clinic on call that evening. So we would have had to have gone to the same clinic, which again was over an hour away, and seen a regular emergency room doctor. Not to say that they couldn't do anything, but the ophthalmologist is very aware of his condition.
So it was lucky for us that the ophthalmologist knew that we were going to be worried and concerned, and she had given us her personal cell phone number in the event that we had questions or concerns about what happened. So after getting off the phone with the clinic, we decided that this was one of those instances where it was okay for us to send a text message to the vet and find out what her thoughts were. So we're gonna put it up now. She asked us for a few pictures, and when our pictures weren't good enough, she asked us for more. And now we're taking it down. Basically came back almost immediately and said, this is exactly what I expected. There's nothing to be concerned about.
Which was a huge relief.
After having been through kind of the 24 hours prior, it was a big relief to not have to take him back to a vet. So the next 2 weeks were really kind of giving him medicine, making sure he's okay, making sure his collar stayed on. He did destroy one. He's really good at figuring out that if you run into a tree fast, the plastic ones break. And then it was time for the 2-week checkup.
So at the 2-week checkup, again, I'm gonna read a note from his chart, and it says, Bosley's corneal ulcerations are improved following the tacking and treatment with topical medications. It is recommended that Bosley have surgery to correct his eyelid at the next available surgery appointment. Woohoo! Another surgery. At his 2-week checkup, we went ahead and scheduled his second surgery for December 1st. 2 days later, we had our Christmas pictures, and we'll go ahead and share those with you here. He was beginning to act like a normal 10-month-old puppy at this point again. On December 1st, he had his second surgery, and boy, was it a doozy. Again, the clinic was very awesome and called us right before surgery, right after surgery, and then scheduled a time to pick up. When I went to pick him up that afternoon after his second surgery, so this surgery was to basically what I say is give him an eye lift. The first one tacked it down so that his eyelids were facing outward and not inward, and this pulled them. So she removed all of the extra skin and pulled his eyelids tight so that they wouldn't fold back in again. I spoke with the doctor and she considered this a permanent solution, but because he was only 10 months old at the time, there is potential that with him growing, his eyelids would grow as well and become loose, and in the future may require an additional surgery. Next, the nurse came out to go over all the post-op instructions, which weren't nearly as intensive as the first surgery. Lucky for us. She then looked at me and said, "Emily, we had to shave his face to do this surgery." And I was like, "Yeah, that's fine. We just passed Halloween. We're all good." And she said, "Well, I just want to let you know because some people freak out a little bit, but just know it's hair and I promise it'll grow back."
And thank goodness it did.
While the nurse gave me ample warning, I wasn't fully prepared for what I was about to see. As she rounded the corner with Bosley, I laughed and cried at the same time. This was the first time you could really see his eyes in several weeks. Although his new haircut gained him a few extra nicknames, he was definitely feeling better and beginning to act like the 10.5-month-old puppy that he was. He was playing and taking his cone off and running around in the snow and just truly enjoying life, a sight we hadn't seen for months. On December 15th, we had Bosley's 2-week checkup for his second surgery. The ophthalmologist said that Bosley was healing as expected and everything looked great. He was fully released, and as of this point, he doesn't require any additional surgeries or checkups.
So that pretty much concludes Bosley's Entropion story. We know that most cases don't end up in emergency situations. It just happened to in ours, and we wanted to share it with you. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, or if you've gone through an Entropion surgery, we'd like to know your results. Bosley is about 1.5 years now, and so far everything is good. He's still healed and everything looks great, but he does risk an additional surgery once he's fully grown. As far as we know, the story ends here. Again, there is a likelihood as he gets older that he will have to have an additional surgery, but right now he's completely released from the vet and free to live life as a puppy and into an old dog.